thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for the invitation. My name's Justin Field, yes, a member of the New South Wales Legislative Council. Can I first acknowledge that we're meeting on Aboriginal land tonight and acknowledge elders past, present and future, and recognise the ongoing custodianship of Aboriginal people to the land. I actually come from the south coast, based down in Milton near Ulladulla. Put it up a little bit more. No worries. Can I hold? In Newtown country, actually, and I also acknowledge the elders from where I come from down there. What a wonderful topic. Jenny and I have just come from an extraordinarily long week in politics. A day is a long week in politics. It's been a very long week. It's budget week, but we're really glad to move into the winter break. And of course, when we come back, then we very much into election time in New South Wales and federally. We could well see a federal and state election. So what a great time to be talking about the future of politics in New South Wales, and I guess from our perspective, the role that the Greens can play in making politics fairer and more sustainable for everyone. So the topic tonight is around our results, where we're going, and 2019. And I guess I just wanted to start by saying results is a really interesting thing for the Greens to consider, and it might be an interesting thing from your perspective as well. I think for the major parties, you see often the way they talk about politics is very much around the election cycle, seats in the parliament, the ability to form government or not. It is very, very much focused on who gets what, the spoils of government, their ability to bring their agenda to the fore in the parliament. I think with the Greens, it's quite a different perspective to the role that we bring to politics. We look not just at our ability to deliver in the parliament through parliamentary processes, and of course winning seats is important, but we also look at how we are able to advance our policies, the things that the community care about inside the parliament, but also to help the community to be able to force that change on whoever happens to be the government of the day. And so we have a very different perspective, a much broader perspective of delivering for results. But I did just want to, before we talk about 2019, there's been a bit of discussion about where the Greens are at. I know most of the people in here are very politically engaged people who've been watching the discussion and the commentary. We've seen what's happened with Section 44 and the terrible loss that we had losing Larissa and Scott Ludlam from the Senate, been replaced by amazing people, no two ways about it. But there's been a lot of discussion about the Greens in the context of that, the election results in Tasmania and South Australia, and of course the Baton by-election. I didn't want to try and digest that too much. I know New South Wales better, and I just wanted to remind people of the absolutely phenomenal outcome that we had electorally, but also in changing the discussion about the role of the Greens in New South Wales politics at the last election in 2015. I actually didn't get elected. We didn't get the third spot up at the time, but of course we got Jenny elected to Parliament in one of the safest seats in the state, and I'll let her talk about that. But touch wood. But people may not recall, and I'll happily remind you, that we made a fundamental breakthrough in winning the seat of Ballina, the first ever time that we've won a seat off the National Party in politics anywhere in Australia. And we came extraordinarily close in that same election to winning the seat of Lismore. And the reason I mention it, partly because I've largely grew up and lived and worked and involved in the Greens sort of from a regional perspective. But that result was really significant because it really proved the important melding of the Greens as a political party with social movements. That win primarily came off the back of the relationships that had been formed through the opposition to coal seam gas, but also the expanding opposition to the coal industry and the need for a fair transition for the coal industry and a dramatic move to renewable energy. And it wasn't just that we were in the right place at the right time, we happened to stand up and say the right things. The Greens were absolutely embedded in that movement. And Adam Guys, who nearly won the seat of Lismore off the Nationals, he was the campaign coordinator for the Bentley campaign up there. Absolutely enmeshed in the community campaign. And it was the community, not necessarily Greens members, but people who saw what we did in the community who got behind that campaign. And what we've seen since then is an expansion of that sort of engagement and both political success but community engagement success. We now have 3 mayors in regional New South Wales. One up in the North Coast at Byron Bay, one on the mid-North Coast at Ballinger, and in my own area, in the Shoalhaven, one of what would be traditionally seen as quite a conservative electorate. Anne Sidmalis, you might have heard of her. She's been in the media recently. She's won the favours of Malcolm Turnbull to hold her seat and through the pre-selection down there. One of the most conservative and disappointing local members, I've got to say, but they continue to hold that seat. But at the local level, the Greens are in favour, and it's because of our deep engagement and connection with the local community. And so I just wanted to put that in perspective as far as our results and our successes, because I think sometimes that really important shift that we've made to not just be seen as, I don't mean anything by this, but I think a lot of the commentators out there often refer to the Greens as being a very city-centric party. And of course, we've had fantastic successes there, and we're deeply embedded in the community and the campaigns here. I'll let Jenny talk about that. But we've had fantastic successes also in regional New South Wales. And so just where does that take us, I guess, for the future in 2019 as far as the state election is concerned? Well, it's very exciting, I think. There's a sense that there could be a change of government. I'm not as confident about that, having seen the performance of the Labor Party in the Parliament. But there, I think, is a real opportunity for a tightening of the electoral race, and it puts the Greens in a really interesting place and potentially in a position to influence a future government in New South Wales, or potentially just to have more influence and to be able to express through our MPs in the Parliament and in the community our priorities in terms of policy and the community's priorities in terms of outcomes locally. And there's some really, I think, huge opportunities again back in regional New South Wales. And what I'm getting the sense of from the other parties, rumours through the Parliament, is that they recognise that incumbency for the Greens, we haven't tested it in regional areas yet, but I'm getting the sense that they realise the community really likes having Greens representing them. And I'm sure that we've already seen that, and we have through being able to hold seats like Balmain and Adam Bance, another very good example of that, and I don't doubt Jenny will hold hers as well. But I think of course, but I think we're already seeing the National Party going, we can't win these seats back. And what a phenomenal change if we can start to turn those coastal communities right up and down the coast. They're unlikely to go to the Labor Party. The Labor Party has almost no infrastructure there. They don't have engaged membership in the same way that we do. Seats like Ballina, Lismore, Tweed long-term, Kiama, South Coast, those are seats that are more likely in the future to go Green than to go to the Labor Party. And we all of a sudden start to see an extremely different electoral map, but I'm more excited about what we do with that, of course, in the Parliament and in the community. And so, and this might be something where Jenny and I, we haven't really rehearsed this tonight, and we might tic-tac over some of this stuff, but I just wanted to talk about maybe what some of those priorities might be, and then I'll hand over to Jenny. We had budget this week. I'm the Treasury spokesperson for the party, as well as a number of other things. But it was extraordinarily frustrating listening to the media in the 2 weeks leading up to the budget. It was as if this government was just going to solve all of our social woes and environmental woes and fix the economy, fix our housing system, fix our education system. But in actual, and the media did their job. They got the leak and they printed it as if it was fact, and then we actually saw the result on paper. And what we've seen is that after 10 years of privatisation in this state, $53 billion of assets, services and infrastructure sold off, that they could barely play catch up. And sure, it was a big set of numbers that were thrown out there, but when you got into the details, you realised it barely touched the surface, and that we are not going to see a lot of those critical issues around addressing inequality, rebuilding our school network, our TAFE system to actually be able to deliver for people, building the sort of infrastructure, moving away from the toll roads focus to public transport, transitioning from climate. None of those things are in there. And I'll just give you 2 examples of how distorted things have got. Everyone will have been familiar with the privatisation of the energy sector in New South Wales. Well, we've seen this week just how big a disaster that's been. The government's badged it as helping people pay their electricity bills. $1.9 billion over the next 4 years will go to helping people pay their electricity bills. But what is that other than just a direct subsidy from the public purse to allow people to pay these ridiculous, exorbitant bills that should never have been overinflated? It's a price gouge that's now been legitimised through a public subsidy. We used to get a couple of $100 million a year from these businesses in dividends to the government that went out to the community in terms of services. Now we are paying for the privilege of being able to pay these private entities to run our electricity network. It's no better example of the total failure of this privatisation strategy. And I know that we will be bringing very strong policies to the next election around re-nationalising elements of our essential services. That has to be part of the public discussion again. Climate change. This government, for the 4th consecutive year, has rolled back spending on climate change. They will spend 10 times more this year on sports stadiums than they will spend on their climate action plan in New South Wales. They've got the money sitting there, $1.4 billion. About $500 million was supposed to be spent over the last 3 years that hasn't been spent. They're climate deniers, they're climate sceptics, that is absolutely clear. We will certainly be coming forward with a very robust climate policy, and I think that the public, they are pretty sick. They are pretty sick of the discussion around Adani, the wrecking ball that is Tony Abbott still on the National Energy Guarantee. They are sick of no one putting forward for a vision for change. 100% renewable energy. A very clear phase-out plan for the coal industry in New South Wales is the only thing that gets us back on track in terms of emission reductions. One more thing that I just wanted to mention as a priority for me, I'm also the marine spokesperson for the party in New South Wales. The issue of plastic pollution has captured the public's attention in a way that has been quite surprising. I think it reflects not just a concern for the turtles and the dolphins that are unfortunately killed by this. It reflects a frustration with the wasteful consumer culture that has become so embedded in our society. I think people understand that that is a recipe for disaster long term, and I really hope that we can tap into that. It used to be, I think, much more the traditional ground of the Greens, and I think we've gone through a couple of decades of profligate consumerism. I think people are really ready to change the way they think and act and talk and behave when it comes to consumption, managing our waste and starting to live far more responsibly. So there are 3 big things I really want to take into the next election cycle for the Greens and put front and centre, thinking about what comes next. Jenny no doubt will have some more, and then I'd love to have a discussion with you all about it. Thanks very much.